Hello, this is Property Matters, a weekly catch-up on the world of property, supported by Fairview International Property Consultancy and auctionproperty.co.uk. And we're live every week on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, and our website, propertymatterstv.co.uk. If you're watching on the website, leave us a Google review, and if you're watching on the socials, get involved in the comments section below wherever you're watching us. Our email address for any discussion topics is hello@propertymatterstv.co.uk. There's also a podcast version of the show available every Monday at 10 a.m. on the platforms that you can see on the other side of the screen. So let's get right to it and get to talk to our property expert, Joe Joshi. Hi, Joe.
Yes, good morning, Paul. Good morning to our viewers and listeners. Always plenty happening in property.
And let's start off this week with the news that the Zoopla House Price Index report for November is with us. Some interesting statistics for us to discuss and some trends and also some predictions, of course, as we're nearing the end of 2024 as to what's going to happen in 2025. So as you can see on the screen, and for the benefit of the podcast listeners, 1.5% increase in house prices over the year. That's to October 2024. 2.5% projected house price inflation for 2025. And the projected number of housing transactions in the next year, 2025, 1.15 million, which is down on previous years, but nonetheless, considering what we've been through with interest rates, an interesting situation. What's your initial reaction to house price inflation at 1.5%, Joe? It's no longer property, the investment that it once was, growing 10% a year.
Yes, I mean, it's good to see the statistics are in the plus factor rather than the minus factor. And it will come back, obviously, slowly to that. I mean, property's always been a consistent investment and a consistent way of people sort of either investing or having to, have a challenge towards buying a property and so forth. So I think overall, it's good to see that it's on the plus side. Not such a bad thing that it's at such a low level, so it gives a chance for the first-time buyers to at least get in on the act. And part of that's happened primarily because the big buy-to-let exodus has been happening slowly. So there's been more stock available, and obviously it's always down to supply and demand. And the demand is getting better. The supply is now a lot more sort of available. So in general, I think it's the right trend. I'm not really saying that you're seeing those activities full on, but it's certainly a step in the right direction.
I think it was 14 consecutive mortgage rate rises, wasn't it, at one point, Joe? And it's interesting to see that the market has been quite resilient through this year, despite the fact that buying a house is so much more expensive than it was 18 months ago.
And it's going to get more expensive next year, thanks to our new encumbrance at number 10. When the stamp duty reverts back to the original, which I'm hoping and fingers crossed for the first-time buyers that they actually change their mind and leave it where it is, which I think they will. But I mean, for now, that pressure is on the first-time buyers to see if they can get transactions done before it reverts back to the old rate. But yes, generally, I think that the activity for the government that's come in and the way it was left. Now, we know in the last 6 months already, the current people are making lots and lots of changes of all the promises that they never said they would do. And it was thanks to Rishi Sunak's government that actually the inflation rate was brought down from 10% down to 1.7% as he parted. So that wasn't the current people's efforts. Their effort now is to try and sustain it if they can. And again, with the mortgage rates where they came down with the inflation rate. So, fingers crossed that they don't actually bugger anything else up. But I anticipate that 25 is going to be a mixed half. And that's where we're going to see the differences as time goes on, because they will come along and see that that generally the people want to sort of get on there and get up and get on with the property market. But I think we'll be held back for a couple of things.
It's interesting, actually, to think about the fact that actually, if you're going to try and beat the stamp duty fall back to 125,000 before you start paying, they're going to have to pretty much make a deal probably this week or in the next 7 days or thereabouts. By the time the conveyancing has gone through, it will be March.
Well, there you are. That you said it. I mean, I didn't want to have a go at the conveyancing sector, but I mean, the reality of it is that the chances of the first-time buyers actually benefiting from the current stamp duty, if the deadline doesn't happen, is highly unlikely. And therefore, I'm fingers crossed that they actually increase that time when that comes. And I think most people are hoping that that's what will happen for the spring budget, that they will just turn around and say we've got to sustain the housing market the way it is, and subsequently leave the stamp duty where it is currently.
So you're saying that you think a lot of the stock returning to the market is as a result of landlords selling. Is that your belief or your experience, maybe?
Well, it's a clear indication that the buy-to-let market has been absolutely decimated in pretty much every avenue you can almost think about. So it's only the long-standing, long-established landlords that are able to sustain where they are. For example, 14 rises of interest rates actually is not just bearing the fact that it's a single direct ownership. It's actually all the buy to let. So even if you talked about a base rate at 5%, the buy to let interest rates now have been shifting up to 7% or 8% in some cases. So from someone who was doing twos and threes, they've just added a hell of a lot of money on that. So that in itself made it very difficult for landlords to sustain. It made it even more difficult for tenants to sustain a higher rate of rental rent that they had to now start paying. So yes, that has brought a lot of properties back into the marketplace. And the properties that they brought back into the marketplace were the properties that perhaps the other competitors in that was the first time buyers. So when you get the bottom end of the market, for example, your one bedroom, two bedroom flats, they are also the same, the two buyers that compete for that property. One is the investor, because he says, well, actually, I've got money in the bank and I'm not earning any interest, so I'll buy that. And the other person is a first time buyer. Well, if they are starved of stock, then of course, the whole system stands still. And you start to rely on the investors. So I think at the moment, the first time buyers are getting an edge on that, whereas when the investors are actually saying, well, actually, we're going to come out of this. Now, the only problem with some of that stock is that the stock has also got short leases. So people have had things in their portfolio for years and years and years, and now they're coming to sort of come to the end of it, and they're thinking, okay, well, actually, I don't want to increase the lease because all the money that they've actually made is now going to be paid back to the freeholder to increase the lease. So they'd rather just get out, cut their losses, and sell for whatever they can, so that they can move that same money onto perhaps another project. But that then creates a problem for the first time buyers. The first time buyers don't have the money to be able to go and increase the lease that they need to increase. So all of those things start to cause a problem, really.
Interesting to look at some of the stats on the screen here now. Sales market activity records strong end to the year, says the report. But look at this, buyer demand year on year. So this is from this time last year, 24% up. So there's 24% more people buying. There's 19% more sales and 15% new flow of supply, which we've just discussed, and 10% increase in stock of homes for sale. What's creating the buyer demand? I mean, that, up a quarter in a year, Joe. Is it just the fact that we're having to find, learning to live with the cost of buying a house at sort of 4.5% bank rate?
When you look back at the history of the housing market, Paul, it's been always very, very resilient. And I've lived through, and I know some of the people that I've worked with over the years have lived through interest rates, and perhaps even you have, when they were 15, 16, 17, 18% in some cases. And we didn't really adjust from that. So, it was it was better than a Christmas present when the interest rates was at sort of 1-2% or even at 0.5%. But the real thing is that most people want to, and certainly have a wish to own their own property at some stage of their life. So they do tend to adjust to it. Of course, theoretically salaries have gone up. We've been paying the NHS more money and all sorts of other things that have gone up. The rail guys are getting more money. So generally there is more liquidity available, and so it tends to start to adjust. But yes, over the last couple of years, 14 times the interest rate that was raised, and then on top of that, you've got inflation that was there, and now of course we have a change of government that's just chucked loads of taxes out. So we're a nation of boxers, spending our time in the boxing ring with all those people that keep throwing punches at us, but we keep getting up and saying, you know what, it's okay, we're gonna do this. And I think that's what the property market's about. So you don't want to be with Mike Tyson too many times.
Looking at the house price inflation on a regional level, it's interesting to note this year that this is the first time for quite a while that everything has been in a positive amount, albeit very small. So the southeast is, of course, the smallest growth area, just 0.3% growth in prices. Going up, of course, as you might expect, to higher rises in the north of England and Scotland and the northeast, etc. But look at Northern Ireland, Joe, 6.3% increase in house prices in the last year. Any idea why that might be?
Well,
I'm
it's a
struggling
case of what's it's a case of what's affordability now, I suppose. And they've stopped bombing each other in Northern Ireland, so that's a good thing. And so therefore they probably think, well, actually the insurance may be not as high because it's not going to be blown up. But the reality of it is that it's about what you can get. It's what you get for your money, and it gives the opportunity for the first time buyers to step onto the housing ladder generally a lot easier. And that's been the success of the north of England as well. And that's why 0.3% in the south, because it is the heavier part. It is the one that is the most expensive part. But to get on the run of the ladder, there are other choices. And so Northern Ireland is offering that choice at the moment.
Interesting to see that the OBR have said that household disposable incomes increased by 15% from Q2 of 2022 to Q2 of this year. House prices grew by just 1.5% over the same period. So that's a trend that has helped to repair housing affordability without the need for additional house price falls. Incomes are forecast to grow more modestly after 2025. This is according to the OBR. And this time last year, the report was saying that, rising incomes were going to have to do the hard work to reset housing affordability. And actually, wage growth has grown and disposable income, therefore, has grown beyond what most people expected. So I guess to some extent, that's what's making houses more affordable.
Yes, like I said, there's more liquidity in people's wallets, certainly in certain employment sectors. Not always where it is. Of course, the minimum wage was pushed up as well. So all in all, I mean, they're only pounds and pennies in the short term, but they are potentially, more money there that people can afford to say, right, I'm going to take that chance and get on with it. And it's the perfect time for it because the houses are rising, but they're only at 1.5% across the board. Now we've been through a situation through the pandemic where we were at nearly 22, some cases 23% increase in that small time because everybody was running for the that sort of race for space situation, and the market went a bit gaga. But people have forgotten that there was an increase of 20 odd percent only some years ago. So when it falls back 2 or 3%, it's just like the media. The media likes to sell bad news, always sells better, Paul. You know that. So therefore, if they think, house prices are going down, that's the front page news, isn't it? But they forget that they've had 20% of it over the last few years anyway. So another percent here or there isn't going to actually break their bank. But it sells papers, it sells in the media, so they want to turn around and say, house prices are going down. I bet you there is not as much media coverage as house prices start to show up going up. It's people like you and I who wants to talk it because that's our game, that's our industry. But the media are not that excited about it because it's not exciting news, is it? House prices going up. It means everybody's going to go out rushing to buy houses just in case they increase quicker. And it's not what the government wants to do. So I think generally it's where we are as a nation. We like to buy, we want to invest. Our home is our castle.
Data on the home buyers using a mortgage shows that the average household income of first-time buyers and existing owners has risen by between 9 and 12% over the last 2 years. In contrast, the purchase price and the price of a mortgage and the size of a mortgage have declined over the same period for existing owners as they have adjusted to higher borrowing costs, says the report. This trend is most notable, of course, in southern England, where higher mortgage rates have hit the demand hardest. In contrast, first-time buyers have made fewer compromises on the price of property they are seeking to buy, whilst taking slightly larger loans. So they're not basically worrying about the fact that it's costing more, because actually their income has gone up by more, but they're actually just taking a longer length of loan in the first place. And that's something we've talked about quite a lot in recent months.
Well, I mean, the standard rate was always 25 years, 25 years is that depending on age, but the younger generation can get up to 30, 35, maybe even longer. Bob Singh's the man to give us the answer on that one. But as far as I'm concerned, there is, time-wise, everybody's living longer, and they have to stretch the whole thing a bit longer. So 35 years, I think, is pretty much the average now for the first-time buyers.
And they're saying that mortgage rates for home buyers have fallen by 1%, of course, in this last year, the average now of 4.1%. While mortgage rates have drifted higher in the wake of the autumn budget, they expect borrowing costs to remain at around 4.25% for a 75% loan-to-value 5-year fixed-rate loan. So they're talking about 4.25 for the next year. Does that sound right with you, or do you think we're going to go lower?
You know my views on this. I was shocked they even brought it down to 4.75, and I'm fairly certain out of the group that made that there was a larger number, so let's bring it down. But literally the next day, the inflation rate went straight up to 2.7% or whatever it was, and I think they probably sat there thinking, well, maybe we shouldn't have done, but the pressure was there to sort of drop it down to 4.75. I'm skeptical that if they bring it down too far, then people get comfortable with it, and then when it goes back up again, we're back in that same yo-yo. So I'm probably more comfortable with saying that if they can sustain it about where we are, it will give the chance for everybody to settle in. It gives a chance for the first-time buyers to get more involved. It gives a chance to get the housing market moving at a supposedly comfortable level. I'm not saying that that's comfortable for everybody, but that's my thinking.
They're talking about the mortgage rate paid by home buyers and the tests that they do, the stress tests of around 8%. They're talking about the fact that that's been something in this last year that's really made it difficult for home buyers to actually get the mortgage because they're failing the stress rate at 8% or thereabouts. And they're saying that they expect lenders to be a bit more innovative in the next year on how they assess affordability for those taking fixed rate mortgages of 5+ years, which will support buying power and levels of market activity over the year. So they're saying that actually it's not in the mortgage company's interest to have too high a bar to get over, because they're not going to do any business either.
That's right. I mean, if the rates are too high, people are just going to sit on their hands and wait for it to come down. And if it's too low, people will get in there very, very quickly. But the fear is, I mean, if they can get some good fixed rates for the next 3 to 5 years, that's probably a fairly safe bet. But I'm not sure. I mean, I'm hearing at the moment that basically the fixed rates are probably circa 4%. So there's not huge amount in it. In terms of where they are. In fact, some of the banks are putting their fixed rates up as opposed to their fixed rates coming down. Even when the interest rate came down, well, I thought it might come down lower, but they actually brought that up. And I think Bob will say that that's down to the swap rates, and that make it harder to actually fix the rates at a lower level.
Talking about Zoopla have a model that tracks whether homes are over or undervalued. And in 2007, at the same time as the global financial crisis, house prices were over 40% overvalued, and house prices fell sharply as a result in 2008-9. And to some extent, you can see that on the screen. There's a graph that goes 1988. My goodness, houses were 80-90% overvalued. That's an interesting piece of information. And then you can see in 2006-7, you can see the 40% overvaluing. But if you look at it now in this last few years, and certainly in 2022, I guess that's off the back of the pandemic, house prices a little over the top there. But generally speaking, this last year or two, and indeed as they're predicting right up till 2027, house prices are going to be houses will be undervalued essentially. So it's a good time to be getting into the market, it would seem.
Yes, like I said, it's more realistic at this moment in time purely because there is a good supply of housing. So subsequently, house prices are not rising at the levels that they have done when the demand is high and the supply is less. So it is perfectly a good time for people to start getting involved, especially for first-time buyers, because without the first-time buyers, there is no increase in the market generally, because that's the run of the ladder. It's them who start to start pushing it forward. So our focus is always going to be the first-time buyers, and the more you can get involved with those, the more they can buy, the better the chance for everybody. I mean, the top end of the market has changed a lot in the years that I've been in the property business. And they're not going to the levels that they were. For example, when we started, it was always about starting with the first-time buyer. The first-time buyer buys a studio, one-bedroom property, and the next guy buys a two-bedroom flat or a small house, and the two-bedroom house buys a three-bedroom semi or a three-bed terrace. You know, it was gradually moving up to the level where you then had the 3 or 4 bedroom detached house guys selling up and saying, right, I'm going to buy myself a property in the country. But those still exist going out in the country, but they don't exist going into town anymore. So there was a whole market that had those opportunities in town, in London, I call it. And when they were selling flats at maybe 2, 3, 400,000, those flats now became 5, 6, 7, 8, 900,000. And those people then thought, actually, well, I'm going to go out of town, but they could never go back into town once they've been out of town. So our buyers in the city are all international buyers to a large extent. Foreign investment coming in because that's where they feel that London's safer to be in than some other parts of the world.
They're saying that in terms of the affordability, they assume an average mortgage rate of 4.25%, house prices rising by 2.5% in the next year, and income growth staying around 4.6%. In the three years to the end of 2027, they expect house prices to grow by 7.5% in total. So not exactly the same rate that you might get in a building society, but as we've always said, there's always some growth, generally speaking, apart from, I think it was 4 times in the last 50 years that we actually had negative growth. They're looking at the regional aspect of affordability. They're saying that at the moment, prices in the Midlands, the north of England, Scotland and Wales are generally fairly well priced. Those houses are running at the right price. In contrast, in the south of England, as you might expect, they appear to be overvalued according to their model by 30% or more based on the average income of all household types. In reality, the incomes of mortgaged home buyers in the south are around 50% higher than the average UK income. Running the analysis with the higher incomes of home buyers reveals a more modest overvaluation. So they're saying compared to the rest of the country, the south is 30% overvalued, but because generally speaking, mortgage income, or people with a mortgage, their income in the south is around 50% higher. So in actual fact, it seems a little bit more modest, but still quite a south and north divide, despite the levelling up that we supposedly had over the last few years.
It was never going to be a levelling up. I mean, it's just something that they wish for constantly because that's the divide. The demand for being in the south is not just international, but it's national, nationwide in the UK. The youngsters want to be, in the bright lights of London. They want to be where things are happening. So they will do whatever they can to try and get to London and feel that they want to be part of that buzz. Yes, there is an element of it, perhaps in the other parts like Leeds, Manchester, and so forth, as pockets, but they're all city-based, and so every city, has an attraction, and the first-time buyers is their number one attraction that they're going to go and get. So I think that will never ever change, and London will remain the way it is.
Let's just move on to the spectre that is stamp duty, Joe. Another factor that's likely to impact price growth over 2025. Many home buyers will pay higher stamp duty from April of next year in England and Northern Ireland as the 2% band for owner movers returns and relief for first-time buyers is scaled back. Using buyer demand data, they estimate that half of existing home owners and movers will pay stamp duty. It's due to rise to over 4/5, 83% from next April, with nearly all movers paying £2,500 more than they would have done. The proportion of first-time buyers having to pay stamp duty from next April will double to 40%. It is extraordinary just how much money is going into the exchequer from stamp duty these days.
Oh, it's colossal. We've said before, and I've certainly said it in pretty much all of our programs, that all the governments, doesn't matter what creed, kind, or culture, the color they are, they all play yo-yo with the property market. They know, that's the main button, because most people invest in property. That's the ideal thing. They want to go and buy their first home. So stamp duty for the first time buyers is colossal. It's a big ask. And especially at the levels you're talking about. So you imagine a £500,000 house or a £500,000 flat, whatever they're going to buy in London. The stamp duty on that alone, let alone the survey costs and all sorts of other costs that they have, is colossal for them to find. And that's money coming to the Treasury. Of course, we know recently, not only are we paying the particular tax in when we're buying it, but we're constantly paying tax for many other reasons of actually owning it. And that tells you how important it is still to own your home, considering how much taxation people are having to pay in order to be just standing still, let alone trying to make money on it. They just want a roof over their head, and the price you pay to have a roof over your head is quite colossal.
Yes, they're saying that buyers faced with higher purchase costs will want to reflect on the purchase price, because stamp duty will actually act as a drag on the house price growth over 2025, especially in the lower to mid price bracket, what they talk about as 125 to 250, where stamp duty will represent 1% of purchase price. I mean, if you look at the middle of the market, you're looking at having to find another 3%. So you think about what you can afford, but then you sometimes forget that you've got 3%. Broadly speaking, it's a rough estimate, I know, but you've got 3% to add on to a £500,000 house.
Absolutely, that's exactly what I'm saying. That you don't realise how much money the first-time buyers have got to stump up, and then it goes to the bank of mum and dad to be able to help on that side of it, in order to make sure that they can get on that first run of the property ladder. I've always said that every consecutive government has yo-yoed the property market to their best effect, because that's what gets them going. And the property market is the hub of everything else, because if people are moving, then they're going to be DIYing, buying new cars, carpets, etc., etc. The rest of the industry starts to work on the back of the fact that the housing market is busy.
And that indeed is another factor, isn't it? Because you never really quite realise. I mean, you find a house and you think, I can move into that. It's perfectly decorated, all the rest of it. But as soon as you start to just touch up something, maybe change a carpet, suddenly the walls look a bit dull, and then you're into a couple of pots of paint and some wallpaper maybe, and that really is the surprise, isn't it? When you get in there and you think, well, I can pretty much move in, but it's never quite that simple.
Oh no, it's definitely not that, and that's what I'm saying. That it's the hub of everything else. Because the minute you do your first bit, for example, you buy yourself a house, and you think, okay, well, it's even if it's a brand new house, Paul, it's never going to be what you want. It's close to what you want, but there's always going to be something you want to change, and you don't want it to smell and be just the brand new scenario. You want to add your own pictures, your whatever you're going to add to it, and that may cause damage while you're doing it, or a new carpet in a room that you don't like, the one that they've standardized when the builder's finish is done. So yeah, it just never stopped, really. I mean, you just got to be constantly doing it, and that's what makes the housing market so important in this country. I think probably in most countries, but certainly I know the UK does.
Just wrapping this whole report up, really, they're quite optimistic for next year in terms of the property market. The housing market's been very resilient, they say, in the face of higher borrowing costs over the last 2 years. Higher income growth and 4% mortgage rates have done much to repair headline affordability. They expect house prices to rise by 2.5% over the next year, with sales agreed ending 5% higher at 1.15 million sales. House price inflation in southern England will continue to lag behind the UK average. incomes need to continue to rise faster than prices to help reset affordability and price more households into the market. First-time buyers will remain an important buyer group, but existing homeowners looking to move need more support to help them realise their ambitions, with more and more having to look further afield to find better value for money. And I suppose that's always something that in this day of modern internet and working from home and all the rest of it, you can perhaps look at moving maybe 50, 100 miles north, I would suggest, if you're finding affordability difficult where you're looking to buy.
I think that's just, the whole moving industry has been evolving, Paul. Jobs have changed. We're a nation now that has deliveries to our homes, jobs, work pretty much every day for something or another, as little as a small screw or something. It's all been delivered to you at home. And so the type of jobs that people are doing have changed, which means that they can pretty much, live wherever they want to live in the country. It's just about, I suppose, family is another area that you've got to think about, especially perhaps, if you're aging, you want to be closer to members of family, etc. But generally speaking, I think you can work from most places now. And communication is getting stronger and better in terms of rail links, but there's always going to be something, isn't there? We're never going to be 100%, because if it's 100%, it'll be boring. So, and we wouldn't have a program to do. So it's very important to make sure that things are not as boring as they need to be.
And on that note, that's a great place to stop for this week. So that's this month's house price index report from Zoopla covered. We'll be back with another Property Matters very soon.